Hello and welcome to the monthly webinar from the Business Ecosystem Alliance. I'm Stuart Crainer and I'll be moderating today's session. Today we're looking at the role of international standards and certification in the sharing of knowledge and the expansion of best practice in management and organizations. Do great management ideas require validation to sweep the world? How can standards in areas like innovation really make a practical difference to global business practice? Answering these questions, we're joined by a unique trio of practitioners from around the world. From Thailand, we are joined by Andreas Holmer. Andreas is co-founder and CEO of MAQE, a professional services company specializing in personalized commerce. Founded in 2012, MAQE is a team of 80 people dedicated to changing how the world works. It has adopted many of the innovative ideas of the Rendanheyi management philosophy practiced by the Chinese company Haier, and is going through the process, has actually completed the process to become Rendanheyi certified. We're also joined by Magnus Carlson. Magnus is a partner at Amplify, chairman of SIS TK532 Innovation Management, and an adjunct professor at the KTH Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. He was previously Director of New Business Development and Innovation at Ericsson. Magnus's daily mission is to provide advice and training that combine leading insights from innovation management research, standards, and practice. And finally, but not least, we are joined by Martin Muller. Martin is Director of Corporate Services at the European Foundation for Management Development, EFMD, where he developed and oversees the new RDHY certification for organizational transformation. He was previously Global Head of Talent and a member of the HR Executive Committee at UBS, and Chief Learning Officer, Global Head of HR Development, and a member of the Global HR Committee at Deutsche Bank. As always, please send in your comments, insights, and questions at any time, and I'll be sure to raise them. So, Andreas, Magnus, and Martin, welcome and thank you for joining us. Perhaps I can start with Magnus. The focus of your work, Magnus, is on innovation. What part do standards play in your work, and how did you come to explore this area?
Well, innovation and innovation management is something that all organizations are concerned with. They would like to have more of it, and they, as a matter of fact, they are struggling with it. We see several surveys that organizations are investing in innovation, but they are not getting the innovation performance that they are hoping for. So there is a gap, a performance gap there to be addressed. And I started in this area about 20 plus years ago. And I think during this journey, we realized that we actually have a lot of knowledge on how to organize for better innovation activities in organizations. However, we have not been so clever in codifying that knowledge and implementing it in organizations so that it actually addresses that performance gap that I just mentioned. So when standards come into play, these are like frameworks or guiding checklists, if you will, to actually help organizations. What is it that we need to think about in order to be able to innovate better in terms of our management practices? Things like the processes we use, how we put strategies in place, how we should think about culture and leadership. So that's a little bit how I come into addressing this work, kind of a frustration that we haven't come far enough in terms of organizing our organizations to do innovation effectively. And if I may, just one story from, you mentioned my background in Ericsson, and that's where I started to get interested in this. And that was actually a question from the board. The board did their annual risk analysis scheme, and at the top of the risk analysis of prioritized risks were the risk of losing our innovation capacity or our innovation capability. And that's true for many organizations. That is the highest risk if they should slow down or stop innovating. But the next question from the board was, how do we know if we are losing our innovation capability. And there are no ways to easily measure that. There are no recognized frameworks and so at the time. So that's why I got engaged in the international community to define what we call the guidance standard for innovation management system that actually can help us to look through that system as a lens to understand what is our innovation capability at a given point in time. And it also helps us to know where should we focus if we want to improve. So that's how I got involved in the first place.
So to some extent, I mean, it's counterintuitive, really, or it's counter the accepted wisdom about innovation. The accepted wisdom is that if you give people more freedom, if you give them 20% of their time to do innovative things, they will become more innovative. But what you're saying, Magnus, really is that innovation without codification, frameworks, some sort of more regimented or shared process won't get anywhere.
Exactly. And we're talking about a common framework and a common language. Those are the enablers that this can provide to an organization. It's about creating the best possible conditions. And very often, that is about removing barriers. We see that organizations are not created to explore new things. They are created to deliver here and now to customers with quality. So organizations have barriers for innovators and teams and so on. So we must be proactive in creating the right conditions, the space, the time, and the resources for innovation to happen. And top management or the people that are providing the resources in the organizations must be involved and understand what does it take to make innovation happen. Otherwise, you would create a lot of frustration in organization. Even if you create the freedom, those great ideas will go nowhere.
Yeah, there's a sense really innovation is almost taken for granted, isn't it? It's like I go running and you see a lot of people running, but nobody actually is coached in how to run. They kind of take it for granted. And I think there's much the same could be said about innovation.
Exactly. And take leaders, for example. The leaders are setting the tone in a company, the culture, and so on. But if they are talking about only delivering here and now, short-term issues and so on, you are not fostering the environment for innovation to flourish. And that is often done unconsciously. You have to proactively address that and make leaders aware that how they behave, how they act as role models are important for the organization and for the innovators that potentially are there and can do great things for your organization. So yes, role models are important. Leadership is important to make innovation happen.
And tell us more about the common language. I mean, so that's a problem you frequently see in organizations, that they talk a lot about innovation, but people within the organization don't really have a shared understanding of what it is, what it involves, and how success can be measured.
Correct. And it actually starts with as simple as defining innovation and what is included. So that's what we spend a lot of time actually in the international work. We have over 50 countries working within ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, in coming up with a framework that we use all the knowledge from all these countries, but also when we're done, we can apply it and implement it on a broad scale globally. And the common language is really the foundation for that. That, and together with a set of principles, a set of actually 8 quite simple principles that define what is this area all about. And just one thing with defining innovation is making sure that it includes more than high-tech products, so that we can also include things like processes, models, our methods, the way we organize and manage and so on, so that we can have full spectrum innovation in the organization. And we know that business model innovation, for example, is one of the most powerful ways to innovate in an organization. And unless you're clear about that broad definition of innovation, you might think it's all about technology and products, and that is important, but that's not the whole story. And we could stretch that even into other types of organization, public organizations that are dealing with, for example, social innovation, sustainability innovations, and so on. That is so important to get implemented, get done in society today. And we needed a broad definition to cover all that. So a common language is key to get started. That's the foundation where we all can relate to and start from.
We're joined by people from India, Denmark, UK, Switzerland, China, Belgium. Please send in your questions at any time during the session. Do you think, Magnus, there can be a global understanding of innovation? Isn't it culture? Aren't the cultural specific elements, don't they outweigh a kind of a universal?
That's a very interesting question. And when we started almost 15 years ago in this process of creating a common framework, a common global framework, we didn't know. But actually, we have now come to the conclusion that there is enough common ground to actually have a common reference framework. And today, that is ISO 56002. That is the guidance standard for innovation management system. And actually, we now see organizations implementing this from Argentina to Europe to Asia to Japan. So this is now happening, and I think that we managed to create, let's say, a common platform or a foundation for what innovation is, regardless of these cultures. Then, having said that, there will always be variations in terms of national cultures, but also organizational cultures that you can add on top of that. But we were looking for what is the common core.
And tell us a bit quickly, Magnus, about ISO 56002. What is it? And there's already a comment saying ISO is not pushing enough to put it in place. But
okay, yes.
Can you tell us just exactly what it is quickly?
Let me just quickly share one image on the screen.
Okay.
Bear with me, and I'll show on the left-hand side. Let's see if it works. On the left-hand side, there's a very rough image of the different parts of the innovation management system. The source is ISO 56002, and it's a guidance standard. That's important to remember that. So in the middle, you have the different processes and the activities that will take you from an innovation intent to innovation value, to value being created at the end. The other parts of the system will help you to make those processes as efficient as possible. So there is an understanding of the context. What are customers thinking? What are competitors doing? There's leadership, where you have things like strategy, policy, and there's planning to break that down to goals, measurable goals, and so on. And of course, you need support, as you can see underneath. So these are on the very high level, the key elements to have innovation management thought of as a system, the systems approach to innovation management, because there are many factors that influence the conditions for innovation in an organization.
Yeah, thanks, Magnus. That's really useful, I think, as a way of understanding it. So can we move on to Martin? Martin, your work with Hire to develop the certification of its Rendanheyi management philosophy. How difficult was this, and what does certification actually involve?
It was insofar not that difficult as we started from their Rendanheyi scorecard, which reduces the Rendanheyi philosophy, which in itself is complex and is ongoingly evolving onto just 2 dimensions. And the idea is to evolve on both dimensions. And if you evolve on both dimensions, you would generate really significant growth opportunities and would thrive in a Internet of Things era. And the one dimension is talking about the self-organization capability in decentralizing the organization and in allowing these decentral units to collaborate with smart contracts and to profit from the value that is generated. The other dimension, so that would be the organizational practices, how you organize work. The other dimension is more the market-facing practices, how you really engage with users, with clients, how you build platforms and ecosystems which are beyond your own organizational boundaries to increase the space of opportunities and solutions to create value. And that should, if you progress on both dimensions, unleash exponential growth. So with that scorecard and this reduced complexity of looking at Rendanheyi through that scorecard, we were able to define 4 standards for both dimensions, in total 8 standards, each with 3 criteria, which we would candidates, organizations asked to look at and to look in a mirror and say, and how do we do along these standards and criteria? What is our approach to it? So we are, among others, an accreditation and certification body and have added this scheme following the usual process that we apply, which is first self-assessment, then an external review. And as Rendanheyi continues to evolve, which we assume, we might revisit the standards and criteria occasionally and regularly and see if we need to update them. So a candidate organization that should profit from going through that certification would be an organization that is exploring management innovation, trying out new ways of organizing work, mostly through decentralization, being it agile movements, but also those that are experimenting with ecosystem approaches and seeing if they are joining ecosystems or if they even are an orchestrator of an ecosystem. And going through that certification allows you to think through the perspective and the angle of Rendanheyi through your own transformation and have an outside-in perspective through that perspective on your own transformation journey. So that's, in a short summary, what you should get out of it. So far, we had 2 organizations that have gone through the process, and with Andreas representing the second one, we saw that the process is relatively compact. It's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you can process through. And how much value it generates, it's, I guess, better for Andreas to talk about.
So really, it's a question of, it gives you the discipline to think through these issues and apply them to your organization, understand how they work in your organization, rather than creating some sort of straitjacket.
Yeah, it might confirm some of your assumptions and your practices, or it might challenge them. And it might help you to validate what you do or to rethink it and maybe even adjust slightly or get some additional perspective. So each case is different and unique. So we also gave Andreas some feedback, which he might agree or disagree with, but at least it's an outside-in view on a pretty complex topic. So how do you manage your transformation? And Andreas, for example, is just kicking off a organizational transformation. And thinking through it again, through that perspective of Rendanheyi, should help you really to get additional validation of your plans.
I suppose the challenge with something like Rendanheyi, which is a kind of broad-ranging philosophy, which is constantly evolving. So actually nailing it down in a way that can be understood even is demanding.
Yeah, so the self-organization, we see more organizations interested in the field who transform along the self-organization capability and empowering autonomous teams. The other dimension is a bit more tricky, where Haier was a hardware manufacturer that had a transactional revenue by selling refrigerators, washing machines and the like, and every 10 years you might have had a client interaction. But they now add recurring revenue to transactional revenue, and the idea is that you much more often interact with your users through digital means and sensors and screens, that there is an ongoing interaction with your user base. So you can drive revenues through ongoing addition of ecosystem partners that are up or downstream in the value chain that interact with you and your machine. So the machine is now a washing machine just a window to a much broader set of opportunities. And this one, Stuart, is one where we see more difficulties for organizations to really adopt that approach. It clearly leaves the boundaries of the organization. It's a much more open, horizontal concept. But there we again just boiled it down to the capability of ongoingly understand user needs as they evolve, to ongoingly remove user pain points, to ongoingly innovate in small steps, not only regularly, but ongoingly, and allow your small decentral units like entrepreneurs identify opportunities in the markets and follow through on them as a daily practice, so to say. Not only once in a decade you have a new version of one of these appliances. So it's an approach which is allowing ongoing innovation activities on this second dimension. Organizations that would really progress on both dimensions are, in my eyes, still relatively rare. But the concept behind Rendanheyi is that you should progress on these both dimensions to be not only to see change as a threat, but the opposite the case, to see it clearly as an opportunity for creating value and ongoingly increasing value that you can create.
Yeah, Martin, thank you. Yeah, Andreas, thank you for joining us from Thailand, where I know it's later in the evening. So you're actually putting the ideas behind Rendanheyi to work in your organization and have just gone through the process of certification. So I'm interested, what do you think certification will bring to your company? I mean, you were doing lots of exciting things anyway and have learned a lot from Rendanheyi, but what will certification explicitly bring, do you think?
For me, I think it's a question of trying to leapfrog in learning, right? Like a lot of people that are in my situation, we spend all of our time working in our business. We don't necessarily have enough time to work on our business, and so you know we try to look outside. We try to learn. We try to read. We try to do all these things in order to figure out what else is out there. The standards come into play as a concise summary of best practices that you can look at and learn from, right? It doesn't stop you from having to do the reading yourself, but it can be a very good starting point, so that you don't have to, you know, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, right, in that sense. And so rather than me trying to figure out what is the best practice in innovation management right now, I went and I took Magnus's course, and instead of figuring out what is the best way to approach Rendanheyi, we went through the certification with Martin. So there's a lot of learning for us there, and I think that's the number one reason for doing it. I should note that both the ISO standard and Rendanheyi will definitely not shy away from saying that context is important. So neither of these things are prescriptive in that regard. It points you in the general direction, but then it's up to you to figure out, which can be it's both liberating and a bit frustrating at times. you still have to do a lot of hard work by yourself, but at least the standards are there to point in the right direction. And then, you know, that's number one. And then if you continue down that road, then of course there's you can use standards for rules to play. For example, I have customers who will only deal with companies that has certain ISO standards, for example, etc. But the real reason is the learning opportunity for sure.
And how does the certification process sit with your employees in Thailand? Were they comfortable with it, or did you how much work did you have to do to explain it?
No, actually, that actually makes it easier to a degree. I think the fact that there is a certification process, and usually these things are quite well documented. So for anyone who's interested can read about it, and this is from a third party, and there's someone that has put a lot of effort into it. So that's just helpful, I think, as opposed to going at it completely alone.
And for people who don't know, how long have you been on this journey with Rendanheyi in exploring your own approach to innovation and transforming your own organization?
Right. So long story short, the company MAQE has been around for about 10 years, and we've been exploring with new and better ways of working for a long time. From agile and lean to design thinking and various forms of self-organization, etc. But Rendanheyi and Hire came on the scene for on the radar, I should say, for us about two and a half years ago, and things moved quite quickly from there, and there seems to me to be a convergence of sorts where being in a yes, Stuart, you noted earlier, I run a technology company, right, and we do a lot of commerce and data personalization kind of things. We also have our hands in the crypto space and once you start looking at that, you have the decentralized autonomous organizations that are changing how things are being organized. So I'm in that space, and then learning about Rendanheyi, and you can see there's actually quite a lot of overlaps between these different frameworks. And then lo and behold, I started learning about the ISO standards too, and again you can see there are a lot of commonalities between these different frameworks. Everyone is coming at it at completely different points of view, but there's patterns, which is very interesting to see. So clearly to me, we're moving into well, call it industry 4.0, call it whatever you want. We're moving into a new world of work, and depending on if you're in the tech space, the organizational space, the innovation space, there are best practices that work, and people are putting those into place as we speak. And so you just have to keep your eyes open and connected those.
Yeah, I suppose you've got the challenge is keeping the momentum going and not ever feeling that the certification or the standard, meeting the standards is a kind of a finishing line.
Yeah, exactly. Context is super important, and actually, that one of the main things that attracted me to Rendanheyi is that it is very context dependent. If you look at Hire today, for those who are not aware, so Hire has about 80,000 people worldwide, and at least the Chinese operations are broken down into 4,500 micro enterprises with about 10 to 15 people each, and these 4,500 micro enterprises are completely autonomous. With their own P&L and what they call the 3 rights, and somehow this system just works, which is fantastic. You look at my organization; is very different. We have 80 people, not 80,000, and so we don't have the need for the same kind of systematic approach maybe that Hire does. Maybe not yet, maybe in the future. But we have to figure out what the right approach is for us when it comes to principles like zero distance to the customer. Like, what does that mean in our context? Hire is a product company it started out as a product company. I'm a service organization. They are 80,000. I'm 80. What's the context? What does that mean for us? Right? So we have to ask ourselves these questions all the time.
Mina Empoyo, who's joining us from Belgium, says, don't we sometimes underestimate the contextual aspect of innovation? So we need to go deeper than the big idea of innovation. Magnus, does that sound true, that we underestimate the contextual aspect, which Andreas referred to as well?
I think that makes perfect sense. And being careful about the context, both the external context and the internal context, understanding what kind of organizations you are, what your limitations are, and so on, are extremely important. But you can also think of the flip side, that it's also important to understand the what's common between organizations. What is the core of the discipline, for example? And that's something we've struggled a bit with in the discipline of innovation management, to actually define what is common and what is not context dependent. What is it that you need to, what kind of capabilities do you actually need to have in place? that goes across different contexts, different sectors, different types of organizations, and so on. So I would argue that you can actually look at it from both perspectives.
Yeah, Martin, I'm interested in what's the overlap with the certification of Rendanheyi with EFMD's other work, which is kind of setting standards within business schools? Presumably the similarities.
The process is similar to begin with. We go through self-assessment and then through external review. What is different, what is the same with all of our 8 certification schemes is that they define excellence in a certain area through a framework of standards and criteria. All of them respect diversity and context and keep the standards at a principle level, a relatively high level, not being prescriptive in how exactly you do things, leaving absolutely enough freedom to innovate and implement your way. However, we try to keep them at what Magnus referred to at some global commonalities which are agreeable. And we have in all of our schemes ongoing revisions with our certified users of our standards and sometimes update them. The digitization has led in our standards for example, for business schools and how you run a business schools, significant changes in the framework that we implemented recently. So I guess the way how we go about it is the same. Here, it's the first time one where we really try to certify management practice in innovating, transforming organizations with a focus really on how you move from the traditional managerial practices built in the second half of the 20th century, from really working on the assumption of stability, predictability, long-term planning, in many organizations quest now to implement flexible new management practices. We try to give here a tool that helps really to think through that transformation, and nobody knows yet the new management practices that allow you to thrive in industry 4.0. Rendanheyi is one approach. And yes, I see what Magnus put up as a framework for 56002. This is all the major domains of management are touched upon to see where is innovation possible. We need to allow more adaptation, more agility in our organizations to succeed. And therefore, I think Rendanheyi is a framework which is very helpful. Well, we see the success that Hire has over a decade, significant every year, irrespective of the market conditions, top and bottom line growth. They made international acquisitions, which they allow to implement Rendanheyi their way. And we see different versions now in the US and in Europe emerge, but all under the same principles. And therefore, I think that our standards are also with the question that was just put by the colleague in Belgium, that absolutely open to the context. We really need to understand the context. Otherwise, it would just be a check the box exercise, which it absolutely shouldn't be. It should be a strategic review process.
So there are opportunities to provide set standards in management practice more broadly.
I would say there are some aspects where how you run the Six Sigma and Green and Black Belt, which were maybe a bit more prescriptive, but at the level of how you allow an organization to thrive in a volatile, disruptive environment, highly digitized environment, I think these standards help you to really reflect how you need to transform your organization. And many organizations are still run with very traditional practices that they are since 30, 40 years. Yes, they have been ongoingly adjusted, but the radicality with which Hire did it is a different approach to it. And we wouldn't expect this radicality, but some experiments on the business line level, on a geographic level, which which we would like also to encourage and to provide legitimacy through the certification process. And yeah, one day, and Magnus might have an opinion on that, 56,000 and X will also become sometimes a standard which is expected from you as an organization if you would like to do business with a certain client. I don't know if it will go down so far, but I can imagine.
Yeah, Magnus, do you want to add something to Martin's point?
Yeah, that's up to the market to decide what kind of standards will eventually be taken up. And there is a certifiable standard being developed right now, which is called 56001. So that it will be possible to certify against that standard in the same way as you can do that with other management system standards in quality and environment and so on. And this is happening already. So organizations are getting certified in management practices in those domains. We have just lacked the dynamic element of innovation within those certifiable management practices. But maybe in 2 years' time, we will have that. So just mind you, what we have right now on the table, ISO 56002, is a guidance standard. It'll give you advice, guidance, and so on. It's great to start with to really understand the ins and outs of creating that environment for innovation in any type of organization. And it's possible to start to do that already.
There's a question for Andreas from Frank Karlberg in Zurich. He says, can you please describe what happens after a person has posted an idea on platforms you use? Who does what in order to help the idea grow and make innovation happen? And I guess what Frank's alluding to, that in Hire, with their micro enterprises and 80,000 people, you can see perhaps how things work. But in a smaller organization such as yours, how do you set up micro enterprises? Do you have micro enterprises, and how does it work if somebody has a brilliant idea?
Yeah. So again, we're doing this as we speak, right? We're changing the wheels as we drive, so to speak. So as you point out, Stuart, within Hire you have these platforms, and they can work as venture capitalists. They can provide funding, and they can do a lot of different things that I can't because I'm not at that scale. What we have at MAQE now is something akin to a venture building program there, where people within the organization or potentially outside in the future has a business idea that we want to support. They will go through a 4-step process in order to validate that idea, which involves getting user input and building traction and all of those things. And then we build it up to a point where it's big enough to sustain cash flow for the people within that business unit. And when they've reached certain financial criteria, we spin it off as a separate entity, and they take equity share. So that's how it's meant to work currently. And so we have 4 or 5 of these micro enterprises in the program currently, but we have never spun off a micro enterprise with and all that equity. But hopefully it won't take that long.
Yeah, interesting. There's the sense from the conversation that we've been kind of seduced by Silicon Valley's view of innovation as kind of all about technology and all about giving people freedom within tightly constrained organizations. Is that true, Magnus? Is that the way you see it?
I think so. Most of the people we're meeting have that precondition that innovation is high tech. It's only for certain organizations. But the important thing here is to democratize it and widen the scope so that you can innovate on your processes, the way you organize, the models you're using, not the least business models, and around services. And as I mentioned before, we need to move into the space also social innovation to make it work also for society, for kind of going beyond, let's say, the profit-making engines in our companies, to innovate on a larger scale also in society. And we really need to think through how can we create a framework that will help us to actually move forward and remove the barriers to make that happen in a more effective way. So that is a barrier. That's why language is important and why we need to think a bit about innovation. It's really about renewal under a great deal of uncertainty. So that's where you need a new toolbox, a lot of uncertainty, you're doing new things. How do you navigate that environment? And you can do it systematically in an orderly fashion, so you actually can increase your chances of creating value in that uncertain environment. That's what innovation is all about.
I think perhaps it's interesting that we've got two Swedes and a German in the conversation, and you're bringing your great cultural power of your engineering mindset and the logic. You're bringing that rigor to the world of innovation. Is that simplistic understanding? Is that true? Do you think, Magnus?
Well, in a sense, yes. We're bringing some kind of, let's say, systematic approach to it. Yes, but we need also to be more than engineers when we do this. We need to have empathy for the user. We need to think about leadership. It's about culture. It's about strategy and so on. If we're too much engineers just wanting to solve problems, that is all great, but that's only one part of innovating, solving the problems. We really also need to be able to frame the opportunities, the challenges, and the jobs to be done that are out there. And it's not until we get a good balance that we actually can create value in the end from innovation.
Yeah, Gina Cox makes an observation that many organizations are still run exactly as they were before the ecosystem around them was dramatically disrupted and became more volatile. I think there's some truth in that organizations have carried on working in their own way whilst the world has changed around them. So from your point, Martin, Fujitsu, I know, were certified, got the Rendanheyi certification last year, Fujitsu in Europe, and Andreas in Thailand with MAQE this year. I'm sure you've had lots of interest in the certification. Where does it go next, and how can people apply or learn more about it?
All the standards and the details are on our website, efmdglobal.org. Go on assessments, and then RDHY is explained in detail. We certainly would invite all organizations that not only think about innovating their managerial practices, but they already started in one way or another and are in the middle of that transformation, to take their certification as an opportunity to really validate and sense check and orchestrate a conversation amongst their leadership team around the way to go next, and to bring innovation out of the R&D department as a pervasive capability of the organization. And to, yes, the end is new technology, new solutions, but the way to enable that needs different ways of managing and organizing. And that's what we would like to provide all of those that are moving on and having the courage to really challenge traditional ways of managing. Many do. Many with whom we speak say, yes, hire is very advanced. That is a very bold objective to see what they do. But you have to start somewhere, and we hope that this tool and this certification process allows you to accelerate your own journey. So please visit our website if anybody's interested to learn more about it, efmdglobal.org.
Pervasive capability is a nice phrase, isn't it? Thank you, Martin. Andreas, you're changing the world of work. So what next for MAQE?
We have a lot of work to do with ourselves to begin with. So as you pointed out, the mission statement that we set for ourselves back in 2016 was to literally change how the world works. That change starts with us, and there is so much more to unpack in the Rendanheyi system. Just to use an analogy, given that I'm in the tech space, so when we build software, we say that we are moving away generally from what we call a monolithic architecture to microservices, which means that we're building systems that are much more resilient and scalable and flexible. Rendanheyi is doing exactly the same thing with with organizations. So traditional organizations are built as monolith. Rendanheyi asks you to rethink it and rebuild it as a series of microservices. And it's nothing short than completely re-architecturing everything that you thought you knew about or how organizations work. So there's a lot of work there still to do for us. Like Frank asked me a few minutes ago, one of the main things for us is to there's left to do is to do the unbundling and actually launch all of these client-facing, customer-facing micro enterprises, and that work is starting now, and it'll be a lot more in that department, hopefully.
We're nearly out of time. Magnus, a final point. Are you optimistic that this pervasive capability, as Martin phrased it, will be embraced by organizations worldwide?
Yes, I'm optimistic. If they take it on the right way, as guidance, as creating awareness, I do think that it can help and create the attention needed for leaders and managers in all kinds of organizations, actually to bring on a more systematic approach to innovation management and take some of the voodoo out of the equation that is typically surrounded the world of innovation. And I think also the way Rendanheyi that has been developed separate from the ISO framework, there are very interesting touch points that they actually go hand in hand in terms of culture when everyone's an entrepreneur. When it comes to zero distance to customers, where we start with the insights and being close to what's happening with customers and where they are going. And finally, the adaptability that we find in the micro enterprises setup, where we can reconfigure our organization in real time, depending on what's happening around us. So those are three very important intersections and touch points between these two strands of thinking about management innovation.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So Andreas Holmer in Thailand, Magnus Carlson in Sweden, and Martin Muller in Germany. Thank you very much for joining us. A really interesting and thought-provoking discussion, which I think turns on its head many of the conventional ideas about innovation and our understanding of innovation. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Our next session is on the 11th of July, where we'll be talking about the ecosystem canvas with Capgemini Invents Management Lab. Thank you once again, everybody, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.